Hey everybody, welcome. Barbara Talisman with Where's Babs, and today we are going to talk about Machu Picchu, Peru, Cusco, the travel I've taken there, the tours I took, and share with you the literal ups and downs of traveling in Peru and seeing all that it has to offer. So I've got slides for you. I've got some video I'm gonna show, so I'm just gonna dive right into it. So I want to show you by day, so you got an idea of what we were doing here. Let me just fix that. Sorry. Okay. So we started in Lima originally, and that was our meeting point. And then we flew from Lima to Cusco. So I've sort of left this out. Technically, this isn't really day one. People came into Lima early. I had already been to Lima. So it was just a way station to get us. We flew from Lima to Cusco. And then we went up to the Marais ruins, Inca ruins, and then to the Las Salineras de Mares, which is the salt pans northwest of Cusco a little bit. So here's Cusco down here, Marais here, the salt pans here, and then our hotel here in Arumbamba. So I'm going to take you through the trip here, and I just want you to keep an eye out on that on this travel blue line, because it is as long as it looks. And where it gets really squiggly, yeah, that's what you're driving in a van. So moving on. So the artwork in Peru and in Cusco and in Lima are all over South America. The murals are just beautifully done. The public art is gorgeous. And so you see it on walls as you're walking, as you're driving by. It's just beautiful, beautiful work. So we get to the Marais ruins. It's probably about a 2.5 hour drive from Cusco to the Marais ruins through mountains and hills and valleys and all sorts of stuff. We are pounding water to avoid the altitude sickness that can sometimes hit. Cusco is at 3,600 meters, so it's higher than Denver. And I was a little concerned actually when we were doing this that we were landing in Cusco and leaving immediately to get down to the valley, and would that affect us? It didn't really hit at the airport when we landed, and their advice from our tour guide was just to drink a lot of water. And that's what we did. And he always found bathrooms for us. So it worked out. And I didn't have any altitude sickness. I had something else that I'll tell you about later. So the Marais ruins, the picture on the left is actually Google Earth. And it tells you exactly how big this site is, that it can be seen from a satellite up in space. And these were built by individuals, by Incans. They've got a way of building so that the land or the ground doesn't sink with rock and sand and soil and then grass. And you'll see it all over Peru or in Incan ruins. And it was determined, there was a lot of research on this, that this was growing, that this was agricultural, and they were growing on these flat green areas. But after they'd done a lot of research, they realized there was no growing going on. It was an amphitheater. And the Incan tribes and Incan people would come together at the Marais location in order to have meetings or celebrations or religious activities. And that was after a lot of research from a lot of different scientists. As you can see, it's rather large. This is the Andes in the background, and it's really a beautifully well-preserved site that has been found, intended, and cared for, and we're not allowed to walk on it. We can take pictures of it, but it was our first glimpse at what the Incans have left in Peru and how brilliant they are in terms of doing their work. And this is, again, the Andes, and as you can see, these rock walls that they built. This is not degradation. This is just sort of age. It's not that people have taken them out, but you can see how sturdy these walls are hundreds and hundreds of years later. So from there, we moved on to the Marais, and that is where the salt pans are. We were also traveling during Carnival, and while Carnival is typical of Rio or Brazil, that's where most of us think about it, all of South America celebrates Carnival. So all these little towns that we were going through and all the big towns, Cusco, were all celebrating Carnival. And so I thought that was a cute sign, Carnavalesco. Marasal is where the salt pans are. These are maintained by the community there. It is a community, sort of like a community garden we might have in the US, but they're maintaining the salt. And this salt is actually sold inside Peru as well as exported. It is just beautiful. And when you look at it, you know, it's just, to me, it looks like a gorgeous scarf. I could see a silk scarf with these colors sort of in drawing, somebody drawing on that in some way. So this is sort of close up. You'll see these squares, and each family might have one or two squares, or they might have just one, or they may own all four of them, and they get inherited from family to family, and they have to maintain them. So they go up these hills, and even though these look deep, they actually aren't. They're probably less than a foot deep. And the water comes in from a spring, and they have irrigation that drops into each of these salt pans, is what they're called. And it's the family's responsibility to make sure the walls are maintained and that it's holding it. And this was not they were not yet harvesting yet. This was just water that was there. And they would harvest in the winter when it gets drier. And they stamp on it as it dries, and then they add a little more water, and then they stamp on it, and then they collect it. But it was a beautiful, beautiful sight. I was really taken by this, and it looked like a scarf to me, sort of flowing down the hill. It was just really beautiful. I don't know that my pictures do it justice on an iPhone, but I was pretty taken by it, and to learn about it and how they're maintaining it. And so day two, which is not day two, but I'm just taking you through this part of it because this is the majority of the trip. We ended up in a hotel, maybe in Urubamba was our sort of base for 2 days, and then went up to Potato Park, or Park de la Papa, where indigenous folks are preserving 700 different kinds of potatoes. And then we went to Pisac and had lunch at Parwa restaurant, which is a B Corp set up by Plantera to teach skills and allow visitors to have native Peruvian fare. And then we went back to our hotel. So this is where I got into trouble, folks. So there aren't as many photographs there. This is the Parc de Pisac, and as you'll see on this picture, there's more Inca buildings and a community that was there for many, 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 many hundreds of years. We went to our highest peak here was 11,000 feet, so the altitude was, and the air was quite thin. And our climb started here and then went all the way up to here. So around here, it was not altitude sickness. My oxygen level went way down, and I was having a very hard time breathing, and I could feel my heart beating in my neck. So I stopped for a minute as the tour went on, and then I realized that this was not good and I was not feeling well. So I went back to the bus and just sat outside and sort of looked over the valley, which was very pretty, and it took them about 90 minutes to get up and back. And what they told me at the end was that they actually stood up there for about 30 minutes trying to catch their breath. I couldn't do it. I was not feeling well, and I just didn't know what would happen. Like, would I go down? Would I not? I didn't want to test it. So, and they said that was the highest we would be, and then we would start coming down. So clearly, my cardiovascular is not ready for 11,000 feet. And that was where I sat and sort of looked over the valley below us while they were at the Pisac ruins. And it was beautiful. This is the road we came up. So right here, this is the road. And it's just all these switchbacks that go back and forth up and down the mountain. And this is where they climbed up to the top. And again, this is definitely, they've decided through testing and science that this was definitely growing, and not for amphitheater, but that this is how the Incans grew their agriculture at the time. And then this is Pisac down at the bottom. So this is the Potato Park. So it's a lovely area. Again, untouched really by anybody but Indigenous people. And I would like to say that I have lots of pictures for you, but I don't. because by then I actually wasn't feeling any better after sitting on the bus for about an hour and a half. And our tour guide had a pulse ox, one of those things that you put on your finger to test your O2. And mine was down to 79, and my heart again was beating, and I could just feel it. So I don't even think I got off the van, but I don't think I even brought my camera with me. So I have like no pictures from this potato park. And one of my fellow tour members had an inhaler, which she gave me. And I took a couple puffs of that. And after about 20 minutes, I felt a little better, but I sort of just sat. And then as I sat and went through the presentations of the kinds of potatoes they have and how the community works and the calendar that they work through in order to protect all these potatoes, and they sell them locally and keep some of them, and how they live a sustainable life. I was feeling a little bit better. And then there was a little bit of a market, and they showed us how they use the wool from the llamas, and they sell beautiful, beautiful things. And I'm sorry I don't have any pictures, but I was really feeling pretty bad. So anyway, it was a nice trip. I was really glad to meet everybody. I will tell you that when I go on trips like this and we're this close to the indigenous folks, I feel very self-conscious taking pictures with them or of them. And so I'm not sure if I had my camera. I might have taken pictures of the potatoes and their calendar that they have and things like that. But I'm just not comfortable snapping pictures of indigenous people doing their thing. I don't know. It's probably just me. Anyway, so that was Potato Park. And then we came back down further, because here's Cusco again, to get to our restaurant. So I'm feeling, a little better, but not yet. I'm still off. And again, we had about another hour ride down to the restaurant. There's a lot of driving on this trip, which I didn't read the itinerary correctly or didn't understand the geography correctly, because it was a lot of driving over the same roads back and forth to get to different things. So we get off, and I'm the last one off, and I step down and I hear a pop in my knee and pain, probably like I don't think I've ever had before. And I've had 3 knee surgeries. And I was like, this is not good. And I have more time in South America. So I told the tour guide that I hurt my leg and it's really painful. And we are about 2 hours out of Cusco and are not due back to the city for another 3 days. So his only option is for me to wait and carry on. And it took 3 days to get back to Cusco and to see a doctor. He said any doctor we saw outside of Cusco would just send us to Cusco anyway. So for the next 3 days, I kind of hobbled along until we got to the doctor, and I'll tell you about that later. So it's a beautiful restaurant. It's again, as I said, a Plantera project offering the ability for local folks to share their Peruvian food with visitors and with locals. It's an open restaurant, and there were a couple of tours when we were there. So this is Potato Park, and here is Cusco. So that's why we couldn't go back, because we're doing this way. We're not going to Cusco. We are going that way to Ollantaytambo, which is why I couldn't see a doctor. And so on day 3, we leave our hotel and we head to Ollantaytambo, Aguas Calientes, and this is the entry to Machu Picchu. But, these are roads we had been on before, and now we're going on them again to get up to our ultimate destination, which was Machu Picchu. So this is where the train takes you. You can do the Inca Trail. The Inca Trail is walking trail is closed in February. So your only option is to take a train up to Machu Picchu and then a bus from the train station up to actual Machu Picchu. So there's no walking in February. So if you want to do the Inca Trail, don't do it in February. Plan for it some other time. And you'd catch this train. And it is a beautiful train ride. This was also a very early starting tour. We were often had to be up at 5 or 5:30 in order to be out and gone by 6 or 6:30. So this is what it looked like at around probably 6 o'clock in the morning as we're driving out of Ollantaytambo, as we're driving out of Urubamba and our hotel up to Ollantaytambo. It was beautiful. It was a beautiful morning. And this is Peru Rail. It's a beautiful train. As you can see, they have um, ceiling windows, and the ride up along the river is absolutely phenomenal. It's really, really beautiful and very comfortable. An hour and a half, not bad. And you were there with your group. It's completely full. So you can also go up to Machu Picchu on your own, but you have to buy your tickets, your train ticket, everything before you get there. They supposedly have 1,000 tickets a day that are offered in Aguascalientes, but there seems to be some issue about that. So your best bet is to go online. If you want to go next year or whenever ticket sales open, you have to buy those tickets in advance. There are plenty of guides there. When you get off the train, they're all licensed. You make sure they have a license, and they will take you through Machu Picchu. You cannot walk through Machu Picchu by yourself. But you can buy the train ticket, you can get on the bus, but you have to have that ticket and a guide to go with you. So it's important, but it's a lovely ride. It's a beautiful ride up. And this is the view from the ceiling. Oops, sorry. And this is the river. We just followed the river, and there's a hydroelectric plant that we come across, and then it goes into Aguascalientes. And you arrive in Machu Picchu, and of course they have a sign, so you have to take a picture of the sign, right? That is not me. I just took the picture. Again, I'm still hobbling and really want to lie in bed and put my foot up and put some ice on it. More on that. And this is the river. We sort of had some lunch along the river, and a beautiful church right in downtown in the square before you go up to, in Aguascalientes, before you head up to the mountain, up to Machu Picchu. So the next day, we get on the buses to go to Machu Picchu, Aguascalientes, and then back to Ollantaytambo and our hotel in Cusco. So this was a long day. Up early, train to Machu Picchu, walking around Machu Picchu for 4 hours. I'm hobbling. I am not climbing like everybody else is. And then we go back. We take the train back to Ollantaytambo, and then we take the car, the van, for about 2 hours back to Cusco. Long day. It was February 13th and 14th. So Valentine's Day showed up in Aguascalientes. And as you're going up the mountain, you're going into the cloud forest, and you just keep going up and up and up. Let me just show you part of the ride. Bigger. But you can see how we sort of get into the clouds. And this is the train, the car, the Machu Picchu bus that takes you up to Machu Picchu from sort of the train area. And as you see, we just keep going up. This is there's the mountain right here, and the clouds. And we were up early. We were there early. It was good that we were there early. It was, again, another morning that we woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning to get on a 7 a.m. bus up to Machu Picchu. And I'm glad we went early, but you can see how cloudy it broke up. It got better. And as you see, it cleared up as we went. So I'm sort of down here. And this is the guardhouse, and my fellow tour members climbed all the way up there. This is, one of the things my mom had always told us about the Incas growing up, and how smart they were and how they figured all this stuff out. And, the Spaniards showed up and thought they could show them everything they needed to know. And yet, 1,800, 1,200, they were building all of the stuff and had people who knew how to make things level and make them straight and 90 degrees, and to make sure that they had built foundation underneath it. So when all those earthquakes, South America is very prone to earthquakes, and yet these Inca sites have not moved, have very rarely moved. And so they knew what they were doing, and they understood what they were doing. And I just thought this was such a great example of something that was built hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. And it's still standing. None of this has been rehabbed by anybody. So it's just a real, it's an amazing building community built by thousands of Incans who came in to help the leader of the Incans build this community here. And there were places where the higher echelon lived, and then places where normal people lived. And thousands of people came in over hundreds of years to build this, sort of like building a cathedral, but they were building it for land and for living. And so this is all agricultural space that they've built here. This is where the non-high caste would live. And then today, even today, they have llamas that are grazing and keeping the grass short. Although I have to tell you, it's a lot of land, and they actually had, when we were there, they were using those hedge trimmers to trim some of it, because the grass in the humidity just grows like weeds. So the llamas, they don't have enough llamas to keep up with it, but it was good seeing them live. So that was sort of Machu Picchu, and from there we drove back to Cusco. So I am now on day 3 of this knee injury, and have been told I have to wait to Cusco, and we made an appointment for that evening, but we ended up being too late because the train is late, and the train is like getting into the station, and we ran into some traffic, so then I have to wait till the next morning. And I'm just going to give you a quickie. So, the tour arranged for me to have an English speaking assistant with me, to see the doctor. He ordered an x-ray, then the x-ray was fine, although he did tell me I need a knee replacement, which I'll deal with later. But nothing was broken. I knew nothing was broken. So then we go for an ultrasound, which I didn't get a picture of because we were deep in conversation about how bad the tear was in my ligament. And it ended up that it's a tear enough that I need to be in a straight leg brace for the next 2 weeks. So I'm into like 10 days worth, and I'll see another doctor here in Santiago. I think like the good news, bad news was that I had planned after this Machu Picchu to come to Santiago for 2 weeks before I leave for Antarctica for an expedition on March 3rd. So when I see the doctor on Thursday, that will tell me whether the ligament has healed and whether I can go on to Antarctica. And I don't know what plan B will be, staying here or heading home or waiting until I have a cruise book to leave San Antonio on March 18th to head back to Los Angeles. So we'll see. I haven't decided. Being in Santiago isn't the worst thing. I have a nice apartment here with a pool, and I'd already booked that. So that whole saying, some things happen for a reason. By the way, if you have any questions, let me know. And if you're planning to go to Machu Picchu, let me know in the comments. But living in Santiago, so the apartment that I have was $500 for almost 2.5 weeks, and I may be able to stay here. And I hobbled over to the grocery store today and got 4 rolls of toilet paper, 7 nectarines, and some water. And it cost me $1.57 US. And I did go to Starbucks to get a pink drink, and that cost me $1. So if you've got to be sick somewhere and you've got air conditioning and you have a pool and you have beautiful weather that's kind of aggravating me, because I've been to Santiago before, but I was only here for a few days, and I wanted to spend the 2 weeks here going to the museums and seeing all the other stuff that I'd sort of cursory looked at last time. So I'm trying to keep my spirits up and keep busy sort of with anything that doesn't require me to walk, because I walked on this for 4 straight days before I saw the doctor, and I was icing it, and I took some Advil, but I don't think it did it any favors. So I'm hoping it did not rip altogether. It's just torn. So that's my sort of story. I did leave Cusco early and got back to Lima. This is flying into Lima. I was there at sunset. It was so beautiful. And I had never been so glad to be back in a city. And then I left immediately from there to come to Santiago and got into my Airbnb early. So that's sort of the story. I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what I think. So I wanted to go to Machu Picchu. This was an interesting idea, this 8 days. I was like, okay, sure, fine. A couple days in Lima on the other side, and then like 5 days in the Sacred Valley. What I did not count on is an hour and a half of driving through mountains and over the same roads over and over again to get to this Potato Park and the Pisac ruins and the Marais ruins and the salt pans, and they were beautiful and lovely. But the time that it took to get to each of these places, and the roads are actually pretty good until you start climbing the mountains, and then it's kind of rough. And they also have put in a lot of speed bumps to make sure that people are not rushing through during any time of the day, let alone at night. And so it's sort of this grinding of gears all day. And I've always said my limit in the car is probably like 3 hours. And we were often in our car in the van for 2 hours for an hour at a site, and then in the van for another hour and a half for an hour and a half at the site. And so I think if I was going to do this again, I would be very happy going to Agua Calientes. I did get a massage while I was there because we had sort of a free day, kind of, sort of. And I got a massage, which was really lovely. And, I just told her either you can help that knee or just stay away from that ligament, whatever you want to do. And so it was just nice, relaxing. And it was $40 for 90 minutes. And I got to take a shower afterwards. And the hotel room, that was the other issue, that I couldn't stay and say, I'm not going on the tour, because we kept moving hotels. And so it wasn't like I could stay in Cusco or Urubamba and say, I'll catch you when you come back, because they weren't coming back for 4 or 5 days. So it was a problem that I had no choice but to continue going on the tour. Otherwise, I would have just stayed in bed, elevated my leg, put ice on it, and said, I'll catch you later. And clearly, there was no way of getting me to Cusco before we were planning to go to Cusco. So, but if I was going to do this trip again, I would not do all of the other things, because while I enjoyed those places, getting there and staying there and getting up at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock in the morning every day to get there, for me, who's a slow mad and a slow traveler and a slow nomad, that was a lot of movement. And it was packing and unpacking. I mean, I left a lot of stuff in Lima, which is why I had to go back to Lima first, instead of going directly from Cusco to Santiago. And I'm glad I traveled light, for sure, but it was just all that movement. And I'd say, a couple of the hotels were good. A couple of the hotels were not good. They were just not in a good area. Like if you hadn't eaten before you got to the hotel, you wouldn't be eating at the hotel. So there are probably other options, but going directly to Machu Picchu is absolutely can be done and should be done. I wouldn't rush through it. I would do, a full day there, plan a full day there. Last train leaves at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And the first train leaves at 6 a.m., I think, because we were on the 7. I'm almost sure there was a bus to Machu Picchu at 7. So you can do it. And Agua Calientes is just a way station, to go there. And I think a beautiful hotel. So it's easy. Nice hotel there. Yeah. So that's sort of my 2 cents on how I do Machu Picchu again. Would I go back? Maybe, but I just make it a shorter trip. But I just wanted to share with you, I have over 1,000 photographs, and I'm not going to bore you with them, but I'll be sharing them on Instagram and on my socials over the course of the next few weeks, and stories, and on my blog. And if you're interested in booking a tour, please give me a call. I'd be delighted to help you plan and think about it. But if you have any questions in the chat, put your questions in. I'd be happy to answer them. It is a beautiful place for sure. And I think had I not been gimping around Machu Picchu, and had I had a private guide, I probably would have done a lot more. And as slow as we were, I think I still would have stopped and just breathed. And I did. But being up in the clouds, and you just saw the clouds come in and out, and all of a sudden you'd see the mountains clear, and then the clouds would come in again, because we were there in the morning, early morning, and we probably didn't leave till 11 or 12 or something. It was amazing. It's an amazing place. The Incas are amazing people. This, in case you didn't know, was the first National Geographic in 1911 that National Geographic put out, from a guy who found them. Somebody said, oh yeah, somewhere around there. And so all of that I showed you of Machu Picchu was actually covered in overgrowth. And so over the course of time, explorers and scientists very carefully sort of pulled back what had overgrown what the Incas had built hundreds of years prior. And even if you look down the slope, it still hasn't been, the overgrowth hasn't been pulled away yet, and there's more of the city down there. So this is what they've cleared to date. But that was what put National Geographic on the map. And there's a museum in Agua Calientes that has the first National Geographic from 1911. So that's sort of where some of this started. The Spanish were there way before that, but the records of what we have in the 20th century are sort of from 1911. And my sadness about some of this is that the Potato Park folks and the Salt Pan folks are living and breathing and doing their work according to a sustainable community in line with the seasons. So if something doesn't happen in April, they wait until it does to pick potatoes or to plant potatoes or to go to market. And so they have this entire calendar set amongst the seasons. And for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, this has worked. And this is sort of part of their religion. The sun god. So the winter solstice and the summer solstice, which is opposite of ours because they're in the southern hemisphere, is where they pray to have a good season. They have granaries up in the mountains, which were like gold for them to trade, right? And they're very well protected and kept with air and sun coming through them so the seeds don't mold. And so they have this whole lifestyle that they've created way before the Spanish and the conquistadors and the Catholics and the Christians came in. And yet, they come in and say, now you have to practice this. And so for me, that's very sad because it's like they've had this figured out for hundreds and hundreds of years. And just because they're not practicing a religion or a way of life that isn't in tune with yours, why would you bother them? So it was wonderful talking to the Potato Park people about how they have done this lifestyle and how it works with families, and they all help each other out and make a sustainable life for them. And the same thing with the salt pans. So it's just it's a very, very, very interesting place, and I would recommend a visit. I just don't think you necessarily need 8 days. Maybe there's lots of other things. Buenos Aires is beautiful. Lima's nice. Santiago is beautiful. So I don't know. You have to decide. If I had to do it again, I was trying to get to the Atacama Desert. I was trying to get to Arequipa. I was trying to get to Lake Titicaca. And I couldn't because this trip was just not working. And so had I done it again, I would probably do, 3 days up to Machu Picchu, come down to Cusco, caught the train. There's a beautiful train, you guys, that goes from Cusco to Puno, which is where it's 10 hours through the Andes, gorgeous along the way, so I'm told, to Puno and Lake Titicaca. And you can spend 2 or 3 days there. Highest lake in the southern hemisphere, I think, or maybe in the world, but in the highest. And people live on islands there. And it's just beautiful. And then you can go from Puno either back to Lima by plane or Puno onto Arequipa and then to the Atacama Desert, the Painted Desert. So if I had to do it again, I would come back to Machu Picchu and then do that whole train ride, 10-hour train ride, Puno, Lake Titicaca, and back to Arequipa. So that's the tour I'm planning to put together. And if you've really